So I have a story to share, a story with a valuable lesson that greatly impacts the person that I am today. It helped me become a better person. It helped me become self-reliant in some way. So it goes back to like my university years, and some backstory, of course, is necessary. When I was at university, I had very high standards for myself. I wanted to get all distinctions. Of course, there was like external motivations, because like the university I went to, if you could get all distinctions, you could get free studies, and free studies. If you could remove that burden from your parents, it's a wonderful thing. It's a good feeling, So it gives you this independent feeling. So I I wanted to get all distinctions, and in like my first year of university, I kind of like winged it. I knew I could do like the minimal amount of work, have some fun. I like go and watch movies and all those sorts of things because there's a sort of freedom when you go to university. But yes, I thought I could do the least amount of work, get my distinctions, like the least amount of work to get distinctions, and get that bursary for myself, and it worked. But after some time, I started to change my goals for myself, and I started to want to work harder towards something that I wanted to achieve for myself. So this was like 5 to 6 years ago, but maybe even more. But yeah, so I didn't know the things that I know now, but I needed to learn something. So after some time, I remember I was writing a test or an exam. I can't remember which one it was, but one of the two. It was one of those important papers for me. So I was starting to study a lot. I would study so hard that I would sometimes memorize all the pages in my textbook. And if I was going somewhere, I could close my eyes and just like revise things in my head. And if I had a certain question which I would ask myself, then I would answer it in my own head. So I would. I had high standards for myself. I would like blow my own mind doing these things. So that's not the important part. So there was a time where I was writing one of my exams, and I had a few friends that were sitting around me because that's one of the things you do at university. The people that you're friends with, you sit next to each other, in the exam hall and those sorts of things. So as I was writing the exam, I came across a question that I didn't know the answer to. It was some random question where I needed to define something. I completely forgot what it was. So I had a friend sitting in front of me, or like diagonally or something like that, and I asked him, what was the answer to this. It was a terrible habit that I did, of course, terrible decision that I made to ask for help, but I thought it was innocent because I wanted to get like 100%, and I was willing to do anything to get it right, or maybe 90 something, something like that. So I asked him to help me with the question. Of course, before I did, I answered all the other ones that I could, and I came back to that last. So it was a good strategy. Anyway, so I asked him for the help for that specific question, and he gave me an answer. And I when he gave me that answer, I was like, oh my God, it makes so much sense. And I wrote it down, So after the paper, I went to him and I asked him, hey man, hey dude, how did you know the answer to that question, man? It's like, I don't remember seeing in the textbook, it was a pretty deep question, and what you said actually kind of made sense, and he told me, I don't know. I don't know the answer to the question. I just guessed the answer to that question. And in that moment when he told me that, it was like a glass broke. It was like I depended so much on this guy, and I was infuriated, of course. I was frustrated because I felt like I wanted to get such high grades for myself that I depended my own goal on this guy. And I asked him, and it's not his fault, of course, but I asked him for an answer, and the answer that he gave me was a guess by himself as well. It wasn't going to be right. It could have been right, it could have been wrong, but it was a guess for me because he didn't know the answer as well. So I was really frustrated in that moment, and it turns out that we both got that question wrong in the test or the exam. So I learned a very important lesson from that. Initially, I thought that I was mad at my friend because, he gave me the wrong answer. But over time, I started to realize, of course, after some self-reflections, I started to figure out what actually went wrong. I started to realize that it wasn't really his fault. Initially, I thought it was, but it was my own fault, Instead of blaming him, I started to see like what I could do to improve this certain situation. And I started to see that it was my fault. I didn't work hard enough. I held myself back. I chose to ask him for an answer to a question that I didn't know myself. I didn't accept the fact that I didn't know it. I thought that I could find a different way. I could find an easy way by asking someone else to help me with it. And I depended all of my hopes on him, and it turned out that I was wrong. So we're both wrong, but I was wrong for doing that, So in a way, I learned from that specific moment to be self-reliant, and I learned the importance of self-reliance, because I wanted so much to achieve the thing that I wanted to achieve that I focused that I invested my own progress in the answer that someone else gave me. But in reality, I let myself down. I didn't work hard enough. I didn't ask enough questions. I didn't do the things that I needed to do for myself to become that person that I wanted to be. So it was my own disappointment. I let myself down the wrong path, and that wasn't the best thing. But in that moment, I learned the importance of self-reliance, and I applied that to many different parts of my life, because that was one of the many different ways that reinforced this lesson of self-reliance. But I depended, it's something that I feel that we all do to some degree, but I depended my progress and my own goals and my own dreams and my own aspirations on something that someone else did or something that someone else said. And that's not a good thing. It's not something that we should do in our everyday lives. Now, it can work for the big things like tests or exams or however else we wish to measure our own progress in our own life, starting a business, different milestones that we have. Because those milestones kind of change after you finish university. There's no really tests or exams that someone marks. There's no report cards and all those sorts of things. It changes after university, So we have our own metrics for our own progress in our own life. So, for the goals that we wish to achieve for ourselves, whatever it may be, developing a business, developing personal habits for ourselves, developing virtues like honesty, integrity, all these different sorts of things, trying to master our own inner peace, all these different things. We have to be reliant on ourselves for these things. We can't come to a position where we're asking others to help us, even indirectly, to make us feel better about ourselves, to help us along our own journey. Now, there's nothing wrong with asking people for advice, of course, but we need to know what advice we're asking them. We need to understand ourselves first so that we can ask them the questions that we need to help us be better people. And for me personally, I started to think about this even deeper when I read Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, and one of the things he wrote mentioned that more than anything else, we seek our well-being in the souls of others. And I started to ask myself that question, do I really seek my well-being in the souls of others? My own mental well-being, my own mental state of mind, do I seek it in others? I had a whole lot of temper issues when I was younger, and I never used to really take care of that. I had self-esteem issues. I had a whole bunch of issues, insecurities and stuff like that. I was born. I think it's natural for people to have that when we're growing up. No one can really predict the environments that we're in. So it may so happen that we develop insecurities as we grow up, because no one really understands the things that's going on inside ourselves. We don't even understand it, and that's why these things happen. But when we grow older, we have to take care of these parts of us, right? So I had my own fair share of insecurities that I was working with, and whenever someone would compliment me, I would instantly feel good about myself. When I would lose my temper, for myself personally, I would hope that someone would start to act in a certain way that would make me feel better about myself. They would say and do things that would apologize or something else of that sort. To make me feel better about myself so that I can calm down. I would hope that they would do something to make me feel better about myself. So I was reliant on how they would react to me losing my temper. I would do something similar when I would hope that after I achieve certain things in my life, like I did well at university and all those sorts of things, that people would acknowledge me, right? They would say, "Hey, Renee, good job, you did well," those sorts of things. I would hope that I would get the the acknowledgement that I wanted. But to be honest, from all these different things that I would do for myself, I sort of realized that no one could satisfy me the way in which I wanted to satisfy myself. No one could make me feel good about myself but me. No one knew how to say and do things to make me feel good about myself but me. That was a responsibility for myself. So it only made sense for me over time to start developing this habit of self-reliance. So initially, where I would constantly feel the habit of trying to invest myself in getting other people to make me feel good about myself, acknowledging me, complimenting me, saying and doing things to save me from my own temper, those sorts of things. Maybe it's something that I developed as a child when I would run and hug my parents or my guardians, and they would say and do things to make me feel better about myself. Maybe it's that, I don't know. But I needed to change that for myself. And instead of turning to other people to make me feel better about myself, I started to turn to myself. So every single time I would feel like I would have to ask someone else to make me feel good about myself, I would turn to myself and ask myself, what can I do to make me feel good about myself? And after I started asking myself these questions, I started digging deeper into certain things. When I would lose my temper, when I would want to be acknowledged, when this whole list of things, right? When I would ask myself certain questions and I would dig deep into these things, I would start to realize that there were certain things that I could say and do for myself to make me feel better about myself. And that was a very empowering thing, because over time I started to no longer feel as insecure about myself, because I knew I could trust myself. I knew I could say and do things to make me feel good about myself, regardless of the situation that I was in. My temper issues for me personally started to reduce significantly. Of course, I do have moments where I'm like I'm very hungry and I don't really talk to anyone, but I started to reduce these things in myself significantly, because I started to focus on myself. I started to ask myself questions to make me feel better about myself, to understand myself better. So I knew if I had to lose my temper or my emotions would flare, I knew what I need to say and do to bring me down to my composure again. I knew when and how to be patient, when and how to be silent, and those sorts of things. When I felt I needed to be acknowledged, I would take a moment to acknowledge myself instead of asking someone else to do it. When I felt like compliments to me now doesn't really mean much to me, because I have my own standard for myself, and I know when and how to compliment myself and make me feel better about myself. So over time, I started to reduce these things, because I started to become reliant on myself. So that's why I started to believe that self-reliance is an important thing, because it helps us become our own people. It helps us take care of ourselves. And as we start to take care of ourselves and understand ourselves, we can trust ourselves. And as we trust ourselves, we can do things that will respect ourselves, to build respect in ourselves, right? Because we wouldn't say and do things to disrespect ourselves, right? And as we respect ourselves, we can love ourselves. I got that from somewhere. I can't remember where I got that flow from, but it's a very empowering thing that to have in our lives, because if we can trust ourselves, we can respect ourselves, and if we can respect ourselves, we can love ourselves. It's a very important thing that we need to have in ourselves, and we can't really trust ourselves if we aren't really reliant on ourselves, because if we aren't reliant on ourselves, we're not really going to know ourselves, those sorts of things, right? So we need to look inwards and start to build a deeper sense of self-reliance. And I know it's a difficult thing, because it's a habit to sometimes ask someone else to make us feel better about ourselves. It happens in our everyday lives, but if we can sort of be aware of this habit that we have to ask someone else to feel better about ourselves, and start to fill in these gaps that we have in our lives, over time we're going to be less insecure, we're going to be less fearful, we're going to worry less, our anxiety is not going to break us down as much. But it's something that we need to develop in ourselves, and over time it will grow. So it's a habit that we need to work on in ourselves, and I believe strongly from my own personal life and my own personal experiments, it's something that can make our lives much better. So in some way, I hope that this helps you develop your own self-reliance. I hope this helps you build a better habit in your life. If you do have any questions or anything of that sort, please do let me know, and of course I'll do my best to help you answer that question from my own life experiences. So yeah, until the next one, take care of yourself, be safe, and peace.